Welcome back. You're watching JKL, and many thanks for staying with us. On the bench tonight, Professor Lukwea Tuoli, Sheila Olang, Willis Otieno, and Javas Bigambo. Many thanks for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Coming to you first, Prof. Kenya's young voices have arguably achieved what any other politician has never. Bringing Parliament to standstill, MPs scampering for safety because they're simply dead against the punitive tax proposals that were contained in the 2024 Finance Bill. But it's disturbing, is it, what followed thereafter? Yeah. The killings, the enforced disappearances, and some dying in police custody. Yeah.
I think, as I said earlier, the software of the political elite is an old software. And it's as old as 40 years, 50 years ago, during the Moi and Kenyatta regimes, when dissent was criminalized and people could legitimately be detained under the law because of dissenting and disagreeing with government. That is a software that a lot of the people running our security services, running our intelligence services, running political offices, still have that software. Unfortunately, the hardware on which they're operating, the people have changed. And the people expect that they should be able to dissent and be allowed to do so. One other piece of that software, which is chilling to me and very worrying, is the very low value placed on human life. The very, very, very diminishing low value placed on human life. And I hear it from the security operatives, saying, you know, I have a gun, I'm on the street, and if you show up, I'll shoot you and I'll kill you. And imagine what kind of value does this person place on a human life? I hear it from politicians, I hear it from cabinet secretaries, saying, you will be killed and you will die, and you know, you'll be shot and you will die.
And I'm sure you must have also heard from the president.
Shoot on the leg.
Yeah, I heard that about shooting on the leg. We worry about that as well. You know, you can die from gunshot wounds to the leg. And if we were going to have a conclave, my view is that part of the conversation in a gathering like that, a gathering of Kenyans, not of Kenyan politicians, but of Kenyans, is how much value do we place on a human life? The young people have demonstrated that they place absolute high value on human life. They have mourned every single person who has been killed. They have attended funerals. They have eulogized them. They have cried. And they have said, this should never happen. The older folk, the politicians, have explained it away. They have justified it. They have said, why are you guys so surprised? We used to do this. I mean, people have been killed all over the place. Why are you surprised about this one? Because of the very low value that we place on human life. And one of the things that we do, which we sometimes study, is that we place huge premium on our own lives and of lives of people who look like us, who sound like us, and who live with us, but we place very low premium on those others. And we have otherized some groups in the population whose value is so low that if they died, it shouldn't even warrant a paragraph in a newspaper to say a human being has died. That culture must change. And if we're going to have a conclave, that is what we must confront. That we say any single life lost is regrettable, and everything necessary will be done to bring to book the person responsible for taking a human life on Kenyan soil. If that simple value pervades everything that we do, you will see less corruption, you will see more responsibility, you will see more accountability, and you'll see people making laws that are just and taking actions that are just. But as long as we hierarchize human lives and place ours at the top of the pyramid and otherize some people who it's okay to kill because, you know, they're of no value to us or to this economy, as long as we have that attitude, and it's not only in the protests that you see and the young people being killed, it's also for the older folk and the politicians, it's also ethnic. There are people who come from communities that it's okay to kill, and then there are others whom you shouldn't kill. It's about, you know, religion. It's about this sectarianism that we have in this country where we say it's okay for some people to die. That would be the subject of a conclave in my mind. Not to discuss how to fix the economy, because that's already established. I mean, You don't need to change the constitution to fix the economy. Not to discuss employment. Not to discuss how to stop people from being corrupt. It's already written in the books that you shouldn't steal, and we are stealing. But it's about what value. When I'm stealing money meant for medicine for children in the hospital, and the children are dying because there's no medicine in the hospital, what value am I placing on their lives? When somebody is shot and I go out there and I say he was in the wrong place, why was he there and was shot in the head, and we see a policeman aiming a gun at somebody's head and shooting and that person dies, and we still explain it away. What value do we place on a human life in this country? That ought to be the subject of a conclave. None of that other political nonsense that people want to go and discuss and say, create this position, create this other position, give this tribe this, give this other tribe that. That is absolute nonsense that we shouldn't entertain in a national conversation.
And Sheila, is it more concerning then when we hear more about weaponization of terrorism laws to charge Kenyans? And we have seen a majority of them cannot even meet the cash bail terms, bond terms.
I mean, I think this country needs to stop treating us young people as if we are children of a lesser God, because we're not. If the system worked in our favor, we'd be occupied, we'd be busy, we'd be running businesses, we'd be employed, and we would have, no time to go and agitate in the streets. The fact, and I said this before, the fact that when we lose a young person, the kind of response we get, the lack of empathy, the lack of parental guidance, the lack of love, the fact that our parents are then dismissed, that they should have raised us better. And I always, sometimes when we discuss within us, we say, at the end of the day, we have time. Sadly enough, they've made up the system where we actually have time. Like, we can do this. And a lot of young people are feeling like they have nothing to lose. And it's really bad when you're sitting somewhere and you're trying to argue with someone who feels like they have nothing to lose. So when you tell them, no, we have to have a country that has to have a future, we're not seeing this future because we don't have investments, we're educated, so that's fine. We can go on TikTok and we can understand what's going on, but what is it exactly that we have to lose? The one thing that nobody wants to lose is the Kenya that is coming on into the future. We will be here 20, 30 years from now, apart from, of course, God permitting. We are the ones who will be sitting here and will be steering this country. So everything we're doing is because of the love of this country. And unfortunately, the backlash we get is, but you're children of a lesser God. So let's not treat your, when you're killed, it's less important than when, someone of a different class is killed, for example. But it is not deterring us. And I think for any young person who's watching out there, like, we've made tremendous progress. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, we are writing history and we're working hard so that we have a country that is there to provide for us, that we are paying attention to the debt that, we're accumulating now to be able to pay it in the future. And we should not be discouraged. As with any revolution, you have to walk through the journey and understand it starts off, it goes, it peaks, and sometimes we have downtime where other people try to take advantage of the revolution. But at the end of the day, we are on track. We are saying that we want a better Kenya, no matter what the position looks like, whether it's President Ruto again in 27 or somebody else or whatever. At the end of the day, we are working for a system that will benefit everybody, by the way, including the political class. So today you are charging those with terrorism. Yeah. Tomorrow the wheels turn around. Now you're sitting in the opposite side. And how would you feel, for example, if Prof now is running the country and then takes you, who is the CS now, and charges you with terrorism? I mean, this intimidation tactics, you cannot intimidate 75% of a population. You're running a battle that you cannot win. Yep. You cannot intimidate 75% of a population. Yeah. What you need to do is, like I said before, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's have a forum where we can speak to each other, but listening to each other, not just speaking at each other, so that we start coming up with solutions. This theatrics that you're seeing in court today are only energizing the young people more. They're like, oh, okay, now you're charging us with terrorism. Well, let's go so we can all be charged with terrorism. And that's the conversation everybody's having. Let's all become terrorists now. You see? So, which is not helping, because now the courts will be full and we won't be able to, to prosecute everyone for terrorism. Kenya, when it comes to Kenya and the youth and where we are today, by the way, it's not that we're not warned. I remember President Uhuru said, you know, we have a ticking time bomb here, which is the youth. And now we're at a place where we see that the time bomb is exploding. If they don't go back to the drawing board, we are here, we're not going anywhere, and we'll just keep demanding that we need a better country, no matter what. And Kenya doesn't belong to anybody. It doesn't belong to the youth. It doesn't belong to the political class. It belongs to all of us. And unfortunately, the tactics that are being used today do not correspond to the population that we have today.
Yeah. And Java's CS Kipchumba Murkomen sounds George W. Bush, and his affection for the terrorism tag in the aftermath of 9/11. Appears clearly this, from the political class, the momentum is continually slipping away.
Well, talk of George W. Bush, it reminds me of the Patriot Act. And why it was enacted, of course, after the 2001 Twin Towers bombings. But I think, like Sheila said, we need to find solutions as a people, and we also need leaders who find solutions to create that better country that unavoidably we must create it, because we don't have any other country. And I think when you look at CS Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen and the suggestions that he has given, the policy that, for example, he promulgated, and some of these things which, of course, have been within the body of law and policy in the country, I think what is more important could be the approach to framing of issues. Because at times, for instance, and what even Professor here has indicated, a politician could be standing or coming from a place where they have got this idea that they want to explain, and maybe they have, the issue is the framing. Now, the other thing is that when it comes to the issue of police officers, for example, using firearms to forestall persons by immobilizing them, maybe who are engaging in criminal activities, of course we know that is even in our law. But I think we need to come to a point where the CS or the leaders do not make the people perceive that the police are out to harm them. So the framing of the messaging is something that's very crucial, so that it should not be perceived. We know that all over the world, everywhere, police will try to immobilize somebody who is committing a crime or trying to get away. The other thing that, in terms of the solutions that we need to have and must have, is that we as a people have permitted bad eggs to hatch. And sadly, we are having lots of these bad eggs hatching, and we have leaders who are not looking at the kind of policy-driven politics to give solutions. Earlier, you had asked questions to my fellow panelists about the transatlantic toing and froing of words, etc., of the vengeful former deputy, or impeached deputy Rigathi Gachagua. I have not heard, for example, any of the opposition leaders give an electrifying speech about any constructive alternatives that they have, say that alternatives to the policies of President William Ruto, or even the way forward. It is about tribalism and how these few tribes should come together in a sanguinal amalgamation to have somebody out of office. Then after you get into office, then what? This politics of vacuity is something that is also not helping us to get to the solutions. Ayub,
and should then be, given that you have diagnosed the problem, and Dr. is here, should the prescription then begin at the doorstep of the executive? When the president, for example, Java says, look, my cabinet ministers, you are incompetent, and he gave them the job.
First, the president always presides over the signing of the performance contract by the cabinet secretaries and the principal secretaries. Kenyans would want to see the president cracking the whip on those cabinet secretaries who are not performing, as a matter of fact. Secondly,
how does politics obstruct that?
Well, of course, we know politics about interests and various interests that are served. But Kenyans are not driven and don't care much about the interests. Kenyans want services delivered. So the president, if it is satisfied with a particular cabinet secretary or principal secretary, have them out of the office. Now, do you know that we're likely to make various similar mistakes in the coming years when we go to the election. It's not just about the executive, for instance. Look at all these other positions, including MCAs and senators. People vote for various reasons, some of them out of vengeance. And today, for example, when you look at the conglomeration of the opposition, most of these guys who've been in the executive for decades, from the late 80s, some of these people held executive positions before even the parents of the Gen Zs got married. They are here telling the Gen Z and the people that they are ready to take the country forward. And the Gen Z should be watchful and hawk-eyed in 2027 so that votes are not stolen. They are not asking them to run for office. They're asking them to watch over so that they can get into office. What absence of mindfulness is this? And that's why we are having, in the alternative of the current administration, are people who want to get into office to do nothing because they have no alternatives. They are not even giving provisional solutions. And I think now in the administration of President William Ruto, because that's where we are right now, what is important? President William Ruto, last year when he delivered his State of the Nation address, he said that his is a listening administration. Kenyans still hang on to those words. President, if you are listening and when you are listening, people want the cabinet to perform. People want principal secretaries to perform. People want ministries to perform. That's what Kenyans want. So the talk is then, as I go to Will, is a collective Kanu punishment.
You know, one thing that I find interesting with my relative, Javas is captured by the legacy politicians to the extent that he's discussing our coming governance based on William Ruto Kenya Kwanza and the Wamunyoro group. Okay, let me just finish. That is why he's looking for the alternative. He's looking for an alternative. Let me just so that you can answer. You will respond. Let me just finish.
For me, I would rather even President William Ruto goes all the way to 2032.
Just listen to my thought. He's looking at William Ruto.
And we are not discussing personality.
Listen, I'm saying,
exactly.
Just allow me to Javas, please, allow me to talk. I kept quiet. He's looking at President Ruto Kenya Kwanza, and he's looking at what is called an alternative opposition. For your information, Kenyans are in neither. They are no longer interested in legacy politics. These are revolution. These are an economic revolution. So, Javas, when you are looking for that which is the alternative, you don't even bother to ask me, Willis Otieno, now that you talk about these economic things, what do you stand for? What is the alternative? Because I'm also an alternative. And there are many other Kenyans who are saying we are looking for alternative politics. And I'll give you an example. What is the number one thing that is making Kenyans not to get jobs? What is messing up our economy? Number one is odious debt. I've told you we are taking domestic debts here. Right now, the debt stock of domestic debt is 8 trillion Kenya shillings, held by Kenya government. You imagine if Kenya government was to stop borrowing from the domestic market and you release 8 trillion to be accessible to Kenyans at lower interest rates with our ideas, with our innovations, and now access to capital. What can't we do here as a people? Interest rates will fall from 18%, 20% to almost 2%, 3%. Kenyans will have an entire market in Africa to invent and to sell their produce. That is what others, for example, Safina Party, we promise. We are not going to borrow from the domestic market. And we believe with that alone, there will be immediate relief when people are able to access capital and they're able to commercialize their inventions. When you talk about that, oh, economy cannot change within a short time, Mwai Kibaki became president. On the 3rd of January 2023, immediate instant relief that he gave to Kenyan people, free primary education. What was that? That was not just a social intervention. It was also an economic stimulus plan. That he said, this family that is paying 5,000 Kenya shillings per term per child, I am giving that parent 5,000 shillings back to your pocket. If you are buying half a loaf for your children every morning, now with 5,000 shillings that you've saved per child, you are able to buy a full loaf every morning for your children. The baker must bake more bread. The baker must employ more people. Government will stimulate the economy through that program that you could able to start feeling immediately. Instant relief. Those are the kind of things that Kenyans want to discuss. We are going through an economic revolution. We are not discussing legacy politicians. We've been there, done that. The sum total of legacy politics is where we are today. 60 years of pain, 60 years of despair, 60 years of despondency. It is now time for Kenyans to move the conversation to be about what do you promise us? What can we do as a people to change our lives? And it must be captured in the economic revolution when people have money in their pockets. Even the issues of accountability you're talking about, the issues of police brutality you're talking about, it will not be there. Police brutality that we are witnessing today did not start because somebody was killed in a police cell. No. Police brutality started in this particular administration for the entire two or three after the Azimio protest. People kept quiet. It is when they promised more economic pain that people said no. They exercised their Article 37 rights to agitate for their voices to be heard. That is when the response of legacy politicians and William Ruto was to shoot at them. So when you discuss accountability, you are discussing the response to the problem. Those are just the symptoms. But the core issue here is an economy that has collapsed and the people are fighting for economic.
And when the economy is revived, it has to have the people who ought to benefit. Is therefore the discussion on lives and the sanctity of life outweighs any other thing.
No, what I'm saying is this. Yeah. We must not just discuss the questions of the accountability issues without asking ourselves the primary question, why did we get here in the first place? We got here in the first place because of the economy. That's the first debate. The second conversation is now on the question of accountability. These policemen who've been killing our young people, they must be called to account. And I always say this. These policemen being used by legacy politicians to kill our young people, I assure you, there is no limitation of action in criminal law. You will be tried even in retirement when the revolution of the young people succeeds. They will try you and they will charge you for the offenses of murder, forced disappearances, and abduction. That is a guarantee that they must live with. They have defined their exit in public service.
Thank you. Yes, Sheila, before we move to the IBC.
Right. And I think I would also, just to kind of add on to the conversation, anybody who is now thinking, okay, let me get President Ruto out and let me become the next president, whoever that person may be, think twice, think 3 times. It is not a walk in the park. In fact, I sympathize with you. If you decide you want to be the president of this country in 2027, I completely sympathize with you because the issues will remain the same. It doesn't matter who will be sitting in that chair. If you're not ready to tackle these issues and you're going there because you are from this tribe or whatever tribe or this legacy, that legacy, that's why when people start off hijacking this conversation of the economic revolution with, you know, this one term, 2 term must go, is not going, irrelevant. Even if President Ruto stays in 2027 and the problem still persists, same problem. Even if you take and you place him with the next one and the problem still persists, same problem. So even the people who are auditioning for this role, they need to understand. The people who are busy auditioning for this role need to understand. We are still coming for their necks. So I really, really sympathize with them. Let them reflect a little bit. It's not business as usual. Huh? It's not going in there and then I'm the president and you're running things around.
Okay,
absolutely.
That one is done. You and Meisha.
Absolutely. The iconic moment for me last year was when a young man was on the streets shouting slogans, running around, and the media guys, including international media, stopped him and said, what are you agitating about? And he said, I want this, I want this, I want this, we are jobless, I'm educated, I have no job, and so on. And he said so many things. And then this guy said, but you're shouting that the president must go. Do you want to be president? And he looked at these media guys and he was shocked. He had visible shock on his face. But why would I ever want to be president of this country? It's a tough job. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want to do it. What I want is that the people who are in charge do this, do this, do this, do this.
You see, you are right, Prof. You know, an easy always lays the head that wears the crown. When you're president, no decision you make can be easy, except if you want to make easy ones. And today we've listened to President William Ruto saying that he's had to make and is going to make hard decisions. You see, earlier Professor Lukoye had mentioned about the conclave and what is it then that should be considered. My brother Willis has mentioned about the odious debt and the manner in which our national debt is. You see, the people can decide. Yes, that is Safina Party's proposal. And it's true that that could be one of the proposals for a possible conclave or discussion, that we as a people want a nation that does not keep having its debt soar. Because look, in the next 50 years that Sheila mentioned, when we will be seated here, and I want to hope that you'll host us in the next 50 years, God willing, to discuss this and say how far we've traveled. We want to have that opportunity to discuss these issues and say that as a country, we are safeguarding that safety net. And remember, I began by saying that democracy is a child of conversation or dialogue. We need to have this perpetual dialogue for our own good to get us out of all this. And on the issues of the president making decisions, your party leader, if in future he becomes president, for instance, and Willis maybe become deputy president, you will be faced by these hard choices as well. And that's why when a president sits and is making hard choices, we as a people have a right to interrogate those choices. And when some choices are good, we say, press on with them. When some choices and decisions are a challenge to us as a people, then we say, Mr. President, reconsider or consider these other choices that you've made.
Beginning with you, Prof, the IEBC is now fully reconstituted. Yeah. Erastus Edung Ethekon, there are perceptions about it, the trust deficit. Yeah. The Late Chebukati's commission exited office in a lot of despair. We had seen 4 commissioners who had broken off on the 15th of August 2022, the Cherera 4, as they were codenamed. What should be the priority areas and how can they shake off these perceptions?
So the first thing is the history of electoral commissions in Kenya and how they are formed. And they have been basically conclaves, if you like, of political interests. Commissioners have gone into this commission with the perception that they represent certain political interests. And the political parties and the formations in the political class have negotiated who is going to be in that commission in order to create a perception of fairness. So that's the first problem. And that problem is that that method of doing things is in the past. It is the IPPG way of doing things where the politicians sit down and say, put so and so so that I'm sure that my votes will be counted. That's the old way of doing things. But today that perception still exists because the process of appointment of these commissioners is still rife with political intrigue, is still rife with political influence, is still rife with horse trading and sometimes even some ethnic thinking that maybe if I put somebody in that place who's from my ethnicity, they will protect my vote. That's old thinking. Because ideally this commission ought to be a body that is sitting up here making decisions and then having people on the ground running things. And those people will be running things based on protocols, based on the law, based on provisions of the law. Yeah. And that shouldn't favor any individual. It will be fair to everyone. So expecting that because I have a commissioner from Huisero in my village, now I can become president, that is the old way of thinking. But the way the politicians are handling these commissioners, the way the commissioners are handling themselves, still leaves the perception that their software has not changed and they are still thinking, they are doing the bidding of politicians rather than the bidding of the Kenyan person. The IEBC is an independent commission, constitutional commission. It is created, it's a creature of the Constitution, and it has been given responsibilities by the Constitution on behalf of the people, not on behalf of the political parties, not on behalf of politicians. But the mindset of IPPG, of Moi sitting down with Raila and the opposition and so on, and host trading and saying, you have 3 people in there and I have 2 and the other person can have 5, that mentality still exists in the political class and it doesn't reflect the thinking in the majority of the voters. The majority of the voters want a commission that functions based on what the Constitution wants it to do, not a commission that does the bidding of individuals. So for as long as the commission does not shed off that tag of being an avenue for political horse trading and being a space where political interests are being safeguarded in there, as long as it doesn't shed off that tag, we will not have they will not have the full benefit of the trust of the Kenyan people. People will still be suspicious, elections will still be looked at with a jaundiced eye, and the results of those elections will still be contested heavily for as long as that perception exists. Yeah.
Sheila, for the young people, what are the priority areas?
Get my ID registered to vote. We're voting in 2027. We're not playing about that. So, we're picking our battles at this point. Jafis is laughing. The slogan is very simple. We're starting to see now, for example, I saw there's concerts that are coming up. if you want to get into the concert, you need to have your voter registration. That's going to be the way to let you into the concert, as long as you're over 18. So we're trying to find creative, inventive ways in order to get everybody to register and to show up to the polls and to squash all of this, the back and forth that we're seeing within the political class. I'm expecting that we see a big shift right from the grassroots moving on up. In terms of the commission, like I said, I mean, it's very difficult. I hope that the commission understands that there is an integrity attached to them. I hope they understand that the job at stake here is that you're dealing with a population that has a trust deficit in the election cycle, and that they would honor that as, well-meaning Kenyans, and that they deliver. I mean, other than that, from my perspective, isn't much we can do. All I know is we need to start registering and we need to start mobilizing, because we're going to make a difference in the poll. I think we're going to send a very strong message as young people on who Kenya actually belongs to, that we are not visitors in this country, that Kenya belongs to us. So straight from MCAs to the MPs to anybody, now we're activated, and we're looking forward to IEBC to actually start rolling out, procedures on how we can do this.
Yeah, and how can the young voices, Willis, be accommodated in spite of the political interferences that we are seeing? And Wafula Chebukati, the late, pointed out in an address to the people of Kenya in 2019 that political interference plays a huge part in the destruction of the commission from it's on its pathway, causing all the destruction that he had at the time pointed out. We had claims of rigging claims from at least 3 politicians, and one, Nelson Koech, the Belgut MP, who said that this current administration is granted that it will get another term.
That is
democracy.
That's the space of legacy politicians. And I say this with tremendous respect to them. You see, that was their old politics. We are now going through a revolution. And that revolution will be realized at the ballot. And the people of Kenya will use IEBC as a tool of the revolution. It will not be controlled by the legacy politicians or their stooges at IEBC. The most important ingredient in any election are the people. Even if you want to rig an election, you rig numbers representing the people. I want you to imagine that on the June 25th, we'll have memorial of election year. On 7th of July, we'll have Sabasaba. And on the 8th of August, we'll have Nane Nane. And we'll have elections on the 10th of August. The run-up to that will be a demonstration by the people of Kenya that we are taking over control. And the numbers that you'll see coming out to vote will be phenomenal. And there's no IEBC. There'll be no military. There is no police that will be able to stand in the way of what the people will be agitating for. Instruments can only be used to rig or to manipulate voting when it is legacy politicians engaging in their own and playing Kenyans in tribes. So that is now tribe A going to war with tribe B. What we are going to witness is Kenyans voting on an issue, the economy, that is cross-cutting across all tribes, that they will not allow themselves to be manipulated on tribal basis to determine the vote. Let me just say one other thing as I conclude on the question of the conclave. The only conclave the Kenyan people want to have, if you ask me, is a conclave that's announced by William Ruto saying, I am going to resign as your president effective this date. Let us have a conclave to discuss the steps that needs to be taken before the date of my resignation takes effect. That is the only kind of a conversation that we can have. Anything short of that, all the reasons, all the things that needs to be done have been done from NADCO to BBG to 10-point agenda, and they've not been fulfilled. What remains is that for him to say, I'm resigning effective 30th of August, 2026 to 2025. So between now and 30th of August 2025, can we have a conversation to agree on what minimum things that needs to be done?
And if he doesn't resign by then?
And if he doesn't resign by then there's no need of that conclave. Why are you having it? He loses the goodwill for any engagement. Because before he had said, I'm not going to kill our people. He's killed more this year than he killed last year. So what are we having a conversation about? Then as well the conclave can die. Don't have it. Okay. Let the water find its level.
Yeah. Javas, it seems a long pathway ahead for Erastus Edung, Ethicon, and the Commission.
Ayub, as you can see on this bench, we are all patriots. We all love this country. We don't need a patriotometer to determine who loves this country more than the other. the issue here for discussion, even as we look at elections, all of us want credible elections, verifiable elections. And my brother Willis was in the Supreme Court. Of course, remember him singing Piki Piki Ponki. And the issue there, when you look at the decision of the Supreme Court, there were critical issues that were distilled. IEBC right now should start looking at the various recommendations, not just in this judgment of 2022, going back in time, going to 2017, going all the way to 2013,
yeah.
So that it understands and appreciates what were the legitimate issues that were breeding discontent in those elections. You see, if elections were a labor ward or a labor room, IEBC is the midwife. And the midwife must be competent, must be ready, must be tooled for the moment. At this moment, as we speak, the issue of tallying and transmission of presidential results, the issue of technology. So that in 2027, the talk, as Willis was saying, the Supreme Court of the other guy with a funny name from across the ocean should not be seen in a bathroom being a plumber that refused to leave the bathroom after doing his job.
You're talking about Jose Camargo.
Exactly. I just did not want to mention the name. That I was referring to the symbolism that he gave. Secondly, on the issue of building public trust, Ayub, IEBC must go out of his way. When all these commissioners were being vetted, you would see that they fully fathom issues of electoral governance, issues of the law, issues of policy. But there's no problem with those issues. It comes to the persons. On Chair Ethicon, we have got Dr. Lutalala, we've got Commissioner Ann. People want to know that these commissioners, as E.G. White put it, cannot be bought or sold at any price on any market. Second, winning public trust. Having engagements with the academia, civil society, ordinary citizens. This year we saw the CS for Treasurer Mbadi engaging with people of Bunge la Mwananchi in a very informal discussion issue. It is important for the IEBC, led by the commissioners, to get out of the comfort zone, out of the ordinary, the normal approaches of releasing press statements, trying to give confidence to the public about the readiness, preparation. And they're going to, it's going to be seen through all these the by-elections that are lined up. But we want the commissioners and the commission to humanize the people's desire and needs and the management of the elections. The other thing is that the timeliness. Look, already we are seeing concerns about generative AI in election and the role it's going to play. Before even Chair took office and the commissioners, already there was a statement attributed to him, which IEBC recanted later on by a stamp of fake. Yeah. How is IEBC preparing itself on countering or using generative AI for good and countering the ills and the negatives of generative AI? The place of technology is going to be very important. Okay. In managing the 2027 elections.
Thank you.
I don't think they've started on a good footing, by the way, because there is a lot of there's a lot of activity across the country related to recalling MPs that people are dissatisfied with, and people have filed petitions with the commission. But the messaging from the commission suggests that we are not going to do anything about it. Already, I mean, basically dismissing the people by, creating an existing loophole, saying, oh, the judgment that removed certain sections from that law made it inoperative. That's absolutely untrue. Because you have regulations. You can receive these petitions. You can look at them and make sure that they conform with the law, and you can go ahead and run a recall vote. But then instead of telling us how you can do that, you're telling us it is impossible to do it. You're starting on a very bad footing. Because next time I will be coming to tell you that there's a problem in the political landscape that you are empowered to fix, and you'll be telling me it is impossible for me to do anything about it. It is a continuation of the IEBC behavior from the past, where they sit aside from the people and do not look like they're here to serve the people according to the Constitution. So these are the things they need to start checking early on keeping an eye on 2027, knowing that there is going to be an even greater deficit of trust if they continue along this trajectory.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what Kenyans are saying. Some questions, some observations. You'll be responding to some. Nyantika Chester says Kenyans are generally a peaceful lot, but unfortunately they have been taken for granted and pushed to the wall by the latter-day. Okay.
Marie Antoinette.
Willis, you can pronounce that.
Marie Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette.
Those uncalled for utter opulence, largesse and wastage is a mockery and nauseates the citizenry big time. Mark_Makuda says Kenya has good formulated policies, but when it comes to implementation, we fail miserably. These empowerment programs are just political campaigns the government is using for their own political mileage. And it continues. And says politics shape the development of any nation. Kenyan politics shouldn't be based on emotions, but rather in issues. Governance has failed from corruption and abductions, police brutality that ought to have been addressed. Kenyans deserve service delivery, not double speak. Captain Kipkorir says, ask the Deputy President designate of Safina Party Kenya and running mate to Jimmy Wanjigi, Willis Otieno, what his plans for Kenya should he take office. Can he tell us anything unique that Safina Party has for the Gen Zs he is exciting?
Yes, I've just...
A potential voter.
These are potential voters. And I've just told you, for us, is about not paying the odious debt, and we promise government not borrowing from the domestic market. You access that 8 trillion Kenya shillings as a Kenyan. With it, this economy will change.
Gitai Joel says, a hungry man is an angry man. You can never contain hungry men and women, not even children. We are addressing the main issues. We keep on going round and worsening the situation. Many of the youths are now into drug abuse. Orutwasam says, I think it's time those in power and the others in the opposition gave citizens chance to decide who they think is suitable to lead the country instead of using language likely to incite people against each other or the other group, which is totally wrong. Again, Rumor says, when will the president address the real issues affecting the people, such as unemployment, police brutality, abductions, bad governance, and corruption? We are tired of blame games and political circuses. If he thinks he is incapable, let him resign and go. Okelo Mwalimu says leaders are a reflection of the people they represent. Before blaming politicians for mismanaging our economy, we must blame ourselves for 1. Accepting bribes during the campaigns, 2. Queuing for financial support at MPs' residences, and 3. Electing inept moneybags. He continues to say, and recent history has it that anytime there is widespread dissatisfaction on the governance system in Kenya, we end up electing a worse class of leaders. If the current political turbulence spreads through to 2027, our governance space will be full of ineptness. Areme_Kiberenge says the situation in Kenya today can only be addressed by acknowledging the issues being raised as legitimate, facilitating justice and dialogue. What we are witnessing is a generational demand for ethical leadership and systematic change. Suppression won't work. Senior_Council says, yes, hold the government accountable, but if your entire agenda is just Ruto must go, then you are campaigning, not leading. Stop shouting, start showing. We have had enough of what's wrong. Now show us what you would do right. Limo Kipto, 27, says Kenya's economy is recovering. Inflation dropped from 9.6% to 3.8%. Shilling strengthened to 129 Kenya shillings to the US dollar, and forex reserves hit nearly $10 billion. The Nairobi Stock Exchange activity is back. IPOs like Kenya Pipeline are lined up. Ayub asks Sheila an alternative magic Ruto needs to perform.
It's the micro economic indicators that need to be worked on. It's the purchasing power. It's access to credit for everyday people. These are all good macro indicators of the economy. But they do not mean that you have money in your pocket. That is where the work lies.
And I think that the people who are asking, you know, we have a culture in Kenya of what's your solutionism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That if I point out that something is not working, your first instinct is to tell me, so what's your solution? So historically, we've had town criers. Historically, we've had people who point out that there's a problem here. Don't ask me how to fix it. I'm telling you there's a problem here. Mm-hmm. And those people have a role in society. And some people can choose to be those people. The watchdogs who come and say, no, I saw somebody stealing something there. What do you want me to do about it? Do what you will do, but I have told you.
Yes.
So,
and we're not short of solutions anyway.
Yeah,
Exactly. Some of us spent many years becoming an economist, following Mwai Kibaki everywhere, and then we're still here with solutions.
And there's somebody who's asked what alternatives.
Yeah.
First, I think we need constructive alternatives. Already what we are looking at are unsustainable things. Now, I appreciate that we have got all these rights that are conferred by the Constitution that we must exercise. But how sustainable is it for us, for example, to keep on burning shops, looting, etc., or even people being shot and killed? This is not sustainable. Secondly, how many people will we be chanting must go after every election if at all performance, for example, is not given room? We need leaders who get into office to perform. And I think all this that is happening is giving Kenyans an opportunity to realize that when we are having parties or coalitions writing manifestos, people must demand that those manifestos are costed so that you know how they are going to be financed when that party or coalition gets into power, so that we also fall off the danger of political parties coming up with propositions that maybe they are half-hearted to implement, or some that they will implement but will be too costly in terms of the costing, the implementation, and digging deeper into the public coffers for purposes of implementation of projects.
But Javas, you've said something very dangerous, and I think it's useful for us to, again, step back a little bit. When you say that the protests involve burning of shops and destruction of property and people dying, I want to disagree. I think, indeed, there are instances where criminals infiltrate these things and do criminal things, and the security forces are up to the task. They should be able to identify those people, charge them, and so on. But I hesitate to equate protests to destruction of property and people dying. The people dying are dying because they are being shot by our bullets. And that can stop. And that must stop.
Yes.
And the people dying, we have seen, are not the people looting. In fact, there are instances where the people looting are being protected by the security forces. But it has become politically expedient for us to say that protests will lead to loss of lives. Protests should not lead to loss of lives. It has become politically expedient to say protests will lead to destruction of property. Protests should not lead to destruction of property. And if that is the case, if protests do not lead to those things, I am fine with having protests every day of the year for 5 years if somebody feels that there's something to protest about.
Okay. Prof, you're very right that protests should not lead to loss of lives. Look at 18th June 2024. Protests that stopped the capital, but nobody died. No one died.
Yes.
The problem here is having some politicians, cockeyed politicians, paying people to infiltrate protests for purposes of exploiting that opportunity for political expedience.
And those should be arrested and charged.
Exactly.
Okay.
But now, you have politicians who, the moment, for example, law enforcement officer says that they want to go for them, they dare even the law enforcement agencies that come for me and see what happens.
Let's
I think
get the final
we need to believe in the rule of law.
Okay. and the final feedback, okay. So, Monica? Yeah, this had been waiting. It was a pending comment. Leonard says intergenerational conclave is unnecessary. It's not the solution to what the country is going through now. Unless they just want to create meetings in which they would be getting allowances, let the president follow the rule of law, let him be informed by the promises. Yesterday, the Senator, Edwin Sifuna, said the last time he attended NATCO, they ended up having many cups of tea with his kinsman, Boniface Halwale. So the final words, starting with you, Prof.
After all is said and done, I think all the contestation that we are seeing, all the arguments we are having, all the protests we are having are evidence of the functioning of our revolutionary constitution. It is just that there's contestation between an old mindset and people who actually believe in the promise of the constitution, that we're having a bit of this conflict. But if everybody gets into a mindset where they actually implement what is in the constitution and what is allowed in the constitution, we will have less of this conflict and confrontation. If those who are given instruments of power use those instruments responsibly and in line with the constitutional mandates that they are given, we are not going to have as many conflicts as we have. And finally, if we just value human lives equally and decide today that anybody who causes an unnecessary death of a human will bear the full brunt of the law and the wrath of the people of Kenya, we will start seeing some change.
Sheila.
Thank you.
Mine is twofold. The first, I guess, is for the leadership. Do not respond politically to economic problems. Go back to the drawing board. And then get some leadership. Instead of focusing on the politics, go back to the drawing board, focus on the economics. Second fold is to my fellow young people in this country. We are writing history. We are fighting hard for a country that we love very dearly. Don't be discouraged by the, hijacking of conversations, by the lack of listening and all of these things. We have to fight for a better Kenya because we're not going anywhere, and we are making progress. So like I always say, nobody can intimidate you without your consent. So we are not consenting to the intimidation. We are fighting for a better Kenya.
Willis.
What I must say is this. It's about the economy, and it's an economic revolution. And when we say part of it is that we will not pay odious debt, what that means is that immediately you inject back into the economy 2 trillion Kenya shillings. That is our debt servicing. And it will continue that way until the year 2034. If you are not going to pay this odious debt, this illegal debt, what can 2 trillion Kenya shillings do to us? It can guarantee you free primary education, free secondary education, free tertiary education, free universal health care across all levels. Because with the 2 trillion shillings you are paying every year for debts that are illegal to your laws, invest it in your country. You will have a country here that Kenyans will ask, is this Kenya or is this the Republic of Nirvana, where heaven and earth were supposed to meet?
Yeah. You see, Ayub, the same way we've sat here to have this conversation, and my father's son sitting here tonight appreciates the fact that the cornfield of sobriety has not been fully harvested. We need to embrace tolerance. We need to reject and refuse incitement. Third, we need to consider how, for example, we can empathize with families that lost loved ones. There's the issue of desired compensations, etc. That is very important. There is the issue of the need to have the law meted for the sake of punishment on police officers that are rogue, that are trigger happy, that actually acted outside the code of conduct. The other thing is that it is important for us to respect institutions that have been created by the Constitution and the statutes. We cannot actually be having institutions created that we willingly and voluntarily or in our own volition disrespect them and then expect good governance. We must respect the rule of law, respect the Constitution, and actually say that together, hold hands, push this country forward. But we'll do that if we are willing to listen to each other, work together, and reject the politics of tribalism that already we are seeing is not issue-based, pure tribalism.
Many thanks, ladies and gentlemen. We came here on Wednesday, it's Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh,
Imagine that.
Willis, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Javas,
thank you, Ayub.
asante sana. Sheila, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Daktari, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Much appreciated for the lovely input you have accorded us here on the bench.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to you two for watching JKL Live this evening, and many thanks for your feedback and the company you have kept us here alongside the good lady and the good gentleman. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week at the same time here on the broadcast. Till then, bye-bye and good night.